What are ketones? What do they do in the body? Well, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of supplementing with exogenous ketones. I'm going to talk about some of the practical tips and considerations, including some of the ketone brands that I use. If you can improve energy metabolism in the brain by feeding the brain ketones, it helps. When I drink ketones, within 30 minutes, my brain works better. If you consume too many, you can, feel side effects. Protect your muscle tissue, grow lean muscle tissue, etc. Just all based on a healthy lifestyle. Supplementing with exogenous ketones is definitely a no-brainer at the end of the day. Everyone should at least once try supplementing with ketones, notice how they feel differently, and then decide how they can leverage that improved cognitive performance.
You're listening to the Primal Shift podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kummer, and my goal is to help you achieve optimal health by bridging the gap between ancestral living and the demands of modern society. Get ready to unlock the transformative power of nature as the ultimate biohack, revolutionizing your health and reconnecting you with your primal self.
One company that's bridging the gap between skincare and skin health is our sponsor, OneSkin. I've been using the topical supplements for the face and body, and I was quite impressed with the improvements in my skin's appearance. Their OS01 peptide is scientifically proven to target cellular aging, helping your skin look, feel, and behave as if it was younger. As a listener, you'll get 15% off your first OneSkin purchase with code MKUMMER at oneskin.co. That's oneskin.co. And now let's get back to the episode. Everyone likes shortcuts. So in this episode of the Primal Shift podcast, I'm going to share with you one trick or one type of supplement really that you can leverage to almost immediately boost your cognitive performance, improve athletic performance, as well as speed up recovery after intense workouts. And of course, I'm talking about exogenous ketones. Now, if you don't know what ketones are or what exogenous ketones are, don't worry about it. In the first section of this episode, I'm going to talk about ketosis and exogenous ketones very briefly, so at least you know what those things are and how they work in the body, what they do in the body. I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of supplementing with exogenous ketones. I'm going to talk about who should consider supplementing with exogenous ketones, because I think almost everyone can benefit, but there are certain groups in the population that can benefit maybe even more, especially if cognitive performance, if mental performance are important to you. I'm going to talk about some of the practical tips and considerations, including some of the ketone brands that I use. And I'm going to refer you to a very detailed blog post that talks about all of the different ones and their individual pros and cons, etc. And then we're going to wrap it up. And I hope by the end of this episode, you have enough information to say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and try supplementing with ketones and see how my body responds. In particular, my mind. So let's just talk about ketones in general. What are ketones? What do they do in the body? Well, ketones are a form of energy for your body. If you've listened to any of the previous episodes, you probably remember that there is glucose, there are ketones, there is lactic acid, and there are different types of energy substrates that our cells can use to produce energy. Fuel for cells, basically. And ketones are one of them. And ketones just happen to be the preferred type of fuel for certain organs, including the brain. Ketones for the brain are like rocket fuel. And it appears that your brain function improves dramatically or can improve dramatically in the presence of ketones. And ketones are a metabolic byproduct if you're on a very low carbohydrate diet, like a ketogenic diet. And the metabolic state during which ketones are produced is called ketosis. That's the underlying principle of a ketogenic diet. But don't worry, you don't have to be on a ketogenic diet to leverage the benefits of ketones. The second instance where ketones are produced is during prolonged fast. So if you don't eat anything, not even carbohydrate, nothing for extended periods, your body's metabolism shifts to burning fat, because that's the only thing, more or less, that is available as a sustainable fuel source. There is also, glucose, obviously, thanks to gluconeogenesis and, maybe some of the other fuel substrates. But predominantly, if you don't consume any food, your body makes ketones and starts fueling those cells that can use ketones. Not all of the cells can, but the brain is one of the organs, and the cells within the brain can and thrive on ketones. And there are different types. And then, of course, the ketones that are produced inside of your body are called endogenous ketones. The ones that you can consume in the form of supplements are called exogenous. Exogenous as in, coming from the outside. And there are different types of exogenous ketone supplements. There are salts, meaning where the ketone bodies are bound to salts. There are ketone esters, where the ketones are bound to esters, different chemical structure. And, some people even argue that MCT oil it's not really a form of ketones, but your body can convert some of those medium chain triglycerides from MCT oil, for example, into ketones. So those are kind of the sources of exogenous ketones, if you will. Now, in this episode in particular, we're not going to talk about MCT oil. We're going to talk about ketone salts and ketone esters. But before we get there, let's talk about the pros or the benefits of supplementing with exogenous ketones. There is a lot of scientific evidence these days that supports certain benefits associated with consuming ketones. And one of the oldest ones are actually therapeutical use cases. If you might remember from one of the previous episodes or even some of the blog posts that I published on michaelkummer.com, the ketogenic diet really became popular as a treatment modality for childhood epilepsy, because scientists discovered if you're on a very low-carb diet and your body makes ketones and those ketones are available for the brain, then it can help with epilepsy, especially in children. And scientists discovered, if there are kids with epilepsy, putting them on a ketogenic diet significantly improved the symptoms and improved their cognitive function. The problem is keeping kids on a ketogenic diet can be an issue, can be, complicated depending on the type of kid. But as part of that, scientists also discovered that, you don't really have to be on a ketogenic diet, or you don't really have to fast for that matter. I think the original use case came from fasting. By not feeding kids and having them produce ketones, their symptoms improved. Then scientists figured out, putting them on a keto diet is much easier than fasting because you can only fast for so long. And then in the third step, scientists discovered, if you consume exogenous ketones, you get pretty much the same effect. So there is therapeutic potential for conditions like epilepsy, of course, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, for anything mentally related. If you can improve energy metabolism in the brain by feeding the brain ketones, it helps. So that's one of the use cases. And of course, hopefully, if you're listening to this, you don't suffer from any of those issues. But if you do, supplementing with exogenous ketones is almost a no-brainer, pun intended. But there are, for everyone else, there are different benefits that I argue can help a lot more people. And the main reason why I supplement with ketones is improved cognitive function. I can tell when I drink ketones, within 30 minutes, my brain works better. As you might know, English is not my native language. I learned speaking English, in school. And so it's still, to a degree, a mental effort, and I can tell if my brain is not working well, my ability to communicate in English efficiently is impaired to varying degrees. Because, my native language is German. And so by supplementing with ketones in particular, before podcast episodes, before YouTube videos, before recording YouTube videos, or maybe when I have to work on very research-intense blog posts, I consume ketones and I can tell my brain just works better. And that's because, my brain thrives and every other brain thrives on ketones. So if you make that fuel substrate available to your brain works faster. You have more mental clarity, better focus, and just better cognitive function overall. But ketones are also neuroprotective. So they protect the neurons in your brain, preventing them from getting damaged, from deteriorating, etc. That's one use case. The second use case that also applies to a degree to me is not the weight management part, but the appetite suppression. I mean, those go kind of hand in hand. If you're trying to lose weight and if you're trying to maybe, consume less than you would normally would, or maybe even implement intermittent fasting as part of your weight loss regimen, then having something that doesn't provide you with a lot of calories, but that can suppress your appetite is helpful. And I've noticed that when I fast for extended periods, consuming ketones helps me feel less hungry. And that's because ketones seem to interfere with or interact with some of the hunger hormones, including ghrelin and leptin. One is responsible for making you feel hungry, and the other one is responsible for making you feel satiated. And by modulating those hormones, exogenous ketones or ketones in general can suppress your appetite, and that can help with extended fast. That can help with, weight management. And if you feel like, oh, I'm hungry, I need to eat something, but you're trying to lose weight, have a shot of ketones and you don't feel hungry anymore, and it can, speed up your weight loss effort. Athletic performance is another one. I actually did a very intense workout, the Murph Challenge. It's, if you do CrossFit, you know what that is. Last year at the end of a 48-hour fast, and I have a separate YouTube video on this, kind of documenting that. And I was only fueled with ketones, with a very high quality ketone ester. And I improved my performance from the previous year by 10 minutes. So instead of 64 minutes or whatever, I did the workout in 55 minutes, which, the absolute time is not very impressive, but keep in mind I did this fasted, no food for 48 hours. And then I did the workout. And that obviously is a whole different ballgame than if I would have just been fat, normally and then do the workout. But just by consuming ketones and changing nothing else, my performance has dramatically improved. Ketones they can also protect muscle tissue against damage, and they can improve muscle protein synthesis. So if you consume ketones as part of your workout regimen or maybe post-workout and recovery, you can actually improve or help your body maintain muscle tissue, build new muscle tissue, and be much more efficient with that than, without. So those are some of the pros and use case and benefits of supplementing with exogenous ketones. But there are also some downsides to it. And one of the downsides, is cost. A high-quality ketone supplement is not exactly inexpensive. There are different types I've mentioned before. There are ketone salts, which are typically less expensive because they are less expensive to manufacture, but they're also less effective. And they can cause gut issues. And that's really, the second downside, specifically of ketone salts. If you consume too many, you can, feel side effects, like cramping, diarrhea, bloating, etc. That is usually not an issue with ketone esters. At least I've not experienced that. So if you consume the premium product, so to say, the more expensive product, you're much less likely to have gastrointestinal issues. But it can happen. The other thing is, for many people, whenever they hear shortcut, whenever they hear something, this can, help me do X, Y, Z, they do this while still, maintaining maybe a poor diet. So in other words, if you start consuming ketones while on a standard American diet, yes, you might get some of the benefits, but that's not really the point of it. You cannot enjoy optimal mental performance or cognitive performance if you're, foggy all the time because of poor diet and then just consume ketones and do a little bit better. Yes, you likely do better, but it's not a replacement for, a proper diet, for proper sleep, for proper stress management, etc. Ketones are not going to cancel out the metabolic impact of a high carb meal, for example. So that there can be a false sense of security, and you have to be mindful of that. The other thing is there is not really there's only limited long-term research on potential side effects of consuming or of chronic supplementation with exogenous ketones. They seem to be very safe. I've used them, over several weeks and several months, even on a daily basis without noticing any negative side effects. But doing this for a decade, I don't know what it's going to do. These days, I don't consume ketones every day. I do it strategically whenever I need a boost in mental performance, maybe because, I didn't sleep as well as I would have otherwise. Or if I have a very, research intense blog post where I need to be hyper-focused, etc., I consume ketones, but I don't do it chronically and not every day. So now the question is, why should, who should worry about or who should consider consuming ketones? And I think almost everyone can benefit from them. Who cannot benefit from improved cognitive performance? Who cannot benefit from potentially improved athletic performance or physical performance, more generally speaking, and, improved recovery, improved muscle protein synthesis? I mean, those are all things that if you live a healthy lifestyle that includes exercise, that includes, all of the things we've been discussing on the podcast, you can benefit. But specifically, I want to say that professionals for whom mental performance is important, like healthcare professionals, academics, researchers, business executives, entrepreneurs, all of those people who can really benefit from being on top of the game mentally by obviously living a healthy lifestyle, but then, taking it up another notch, can benefit from supplementing with ketones. I think those, and those are likely the the group of people who can also, afford supplementing with ketones. Maybe not so much in the healthcare, depending on, your job, but definitely, if you're a business executive or entrepreneur, and you want to amp up your game, exogenous ketones are a very safe and effective way of doing exactly that. Of course, athletes and fitness enthusiasts, if you're like me and you want to perform well at the gym, you want to recover quickly, you want to, protect your muscle tissue, grow lean muscle tissue, etc., just all based on a healthy lifestyle, supplementing with exogenous ketones is definitely a no-brainer at the end of the day. There are also individuals who want to follow a very low-carb or ketogenic diet or who practice intermittent fasting. And the reason for that is that if you embark your journey towards low-carb eating, it's difficult for some, cutting out carbs, getting rid of the carb cravings and going through the initial adaptation, etc. I've noticed that supplementing with ketones can help you. Of course, there is the whole electrolyte issue as well. Usually keto flu is more related to an electrolyte imbalance than, to a lack of ketones. But nevertheless, whenever I switch to very low carb eating for a period, I've noticed it helps supplementing with ketones. If you want to fast for extended periods and still be able to go work out and do certain things, maybe perform better a little bit mentally as well as physically than you would otherwise, supplementing with ketones makes sense. And then there are obviously all the medical use cases I've mentioned before, for any type of mental or cognitive issue, be it, epilepsy, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. I'm not a medical doctor, so nothing of what I say should be considered medical advice. But nevertheless, there's a lot of scientific research out there that suggests supplementing with ketones, having ketones available for the brain can help with many of those issues. Of course, under medical supervision that you're likely under anyway. So, those are the use cases. Those are the people who can benefit. But realistically, as I said before, I think almost everyone should at least once try supplementing with ketones, notice how they feel differently, and then decide how they can leverage that improved cognitive performance, in their everyday lives, in their job, maybe in the business, with parenting, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many use cases where you can do better by just performing better in your head, right? Now, I've mentioned before, there are different types of ketones, ketone supplements, the salts and the esters. And there are even different types of esters and products that appear to be esters, but are not really. And instead of going into all of those details, I would just encourage you to check out my blog post. I'm going to link it down below. But if you just go to michaelkummer.com and search for best ketone supplements, you'll find that blog post with all of the brands that I've tested and my take on their effectiveness. My favorite product by far, just as a athletic cognitive enhancer, is Delta G. I think it's the highest quality ketone ester. It also is, on the upper end of the pricing, but it's incredibly effective and has the most scientific research behind it. But there are other ones. There are, Ketone 8, if you're just into consuming like an energy drink that has ketones, or consuming something that the company called it Ketohol, like alcohol, but with ketones. So it doesn't have any real alcohol, not any ethanol in it, but it kind of, tastes like an alcoholic beverage, even though it's not. And it has all the ketones and all the benefits without of the downsides. There are different brands, again, that I've been using over time. They are great salts. They are great esters. Check out the blog post to learn more. The way I use them strategically for very intense workouts, especially if I embark on them in a fasted state. And that's not very often. I mean, I work out fasted every day, but I don't consume ketones for those workouts every day. Simply, they're just regular workouts. But if I do something very intense, like that once a year Murph challenge, where I don't eat for 2 days and then, do a very brutal workout, I use ketones. That doesn't happen very often. Most of the time where I use ketones is simply for improving my cognitive performance before doing a recording, before writing a blog post, certain things. And I do this maybe, I want to say, maybe 2 times a week or so on average, where I really want to boost my mental performance and make sure, it's as good as it possibly can. So I can, speak intelligently or write intelligently about something that appears to be very complex for me. And that's pretty much it. In terms of dosing and timing, for me, I can feel the benefits within 30 minutes. I consume them, I consume the ketones, and then 30 minutes later, I feel my mind being just quicker, sharper, I'm more laser focused. And very often then I also just do a breath analysis to see how my ketone levels have changed in my breath. And very often within 30 minutes, tops an hour, I can see, an increased not only blood ketone count, if you have a blood ketone meter, but also my breath ketones improve relatively quickly. And that's it. It's one of those things that are a shortcut, yes, for sure, but I think it's a fairly safe shortcut. And if you're already doing a lot of things right, then there is really no reason why not also leverage exogenous ketones. They are such an easy and an effective way to improve cognitive performance, physical performance, recovery. There are not a whole lot of reasons other than the cost factors, I want to say, to not use them at least occasionally. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. It was a shorter episode today, but I think I got through what I wanted. If you have any questions about it, shoot me an email. Make sure you check out the blog post if you're interested in any of the ketone supplements that I use, for many of which I have discount codes. So check that out. I'm going to link it down below in the show notes, and we're going to wrap it up. And I hope I see you and hear you in the next episode.